mayah tapah mayah prajapatinam abhivanditah patihi astaya yogam nipunam samahitah tam na adyagacham yatah atma sambhavah soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah prajapatinam abhivandita patihi astaya yogam nipunam samahitas tam nadya gacham yata atma sambhavah soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah prajapatinam abhivandita patihi astaya yogam nipunam samahitas tam nadya gacham yata atma sambhavah soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah prajapatinam abhivandita patihi astaya yogam nipunam samahitas tam nadya gacham yatatma sambhavah
Samamnaya mayastapomaya
soham samanyaya smayastapo mayah
Prajapatinam abhivanditapati
prajapatinam abhivandita patihi
Astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
Samnagayacham yata atma sambhavaha
tam nadya gacham yata atma sambhavah
Sohang samamnaya mayastapo mayaha
soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah
Prajapatina pandita patihi
prajapatinam abhivandita patihi
Ashtaya yogang nipunang samahitas Chang na jagachang yata atma sambhavaha
Masambhavah
Soham samam nayas mayastapa mayaha
soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah
Prajapati nam abhivaditam patihi
prajapatinam abhivandita patihi
Asangaya yugam nipanam samatitas
astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
Tamna dayaga chamyat atma sambhavaha
tam nadya gacham yata atma sambhavah
Soham samana yamanastapo mayah
soham samanyaya mayastapo mayah
Prajapatinam abhivandita patihi
prajapatinam abhivandita patihi
Astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
Tang nadyagacham yata atma sambhavah
tam nadya gacham yata atma sambhavah
Soham Samanaya Mayastapomaya
Soham Samanaya Mayastapomaya
Prajapatinam Abhivandita Patihi
Prajapatinam Abhivandita Patihi
Astaya Yogam Nipunam Samahitas
Astaya Yogam Nipunam Samahitas
Tam Adhigacham Yata Atma Sambhavaha
Tam Nadya Gacham Yata Atma Sambhavaha
Soham samam nayamayastapomaya
Soham Samanaya Mayastapomaya
Prajapati nam abhivandita patihi
Prajapatinam Abhivandita Patihi
Astaya yogam nipunam samahitas
Astaya Yogam Nipunam Samahitas
Tam nadigacham yata atma sambhavaha
Tam Nadya Gacham Yata Atma Sambhavaha Saham, myself, the great Brahma, Samamnaya Mayaha, in the chain of disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, Tapa Mayaha, successfully having undergone all austerities, Prajapatinam, of all the forefathers of living entities, Abhivanditaha, worshipable, Patihi, master, Astaya, successfully practiced, Yogam, mystic powers, Nipunam, very expert, Samahitaha, self-realized, Tam, the Supreme Lord, Na, did not, Adyagacham, properly understood, Yataha, from whom, Atma, self, Sambhavaha, generated. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Although I am known as the great Brahma, perfect in the disciplic succession of Vedic wisdom, and although I have undergone all austerities, and am an expert in mystic powers and self-realization, and although I am recognized as such by the great forefathers of the living entities, who offer me respectful obeisances, still I cannot understand Him, the Lord, the very source of my birth. Purport. Brahma, the greatest of all living creatures within the universe, is admitting his failure to know the Supreme Lord despite his vast learning in the Vedic wisdom, despite his austerity, penance, mystic powers, and self-realization, and despite being worshipped by the great Prajapatis, the forefathers of the living entities. So these qualifications are not sufficient to know the Supreme Lord. Brahmaji could understand the Lord to a little extent only when he was trying to serve him by the eagerness of his heart, Hridotkanthyavata, which is the devotional service mood. Therefore, the Lord can be known only by the sincere mood of eagerness for service, and not by any amount of material qualification as scientist or speculative philosopher or by attainment of mystic powers. This fact is clearly corroborated in Bhagavad Gita 18:54-55. Brahma bhuta prasanatma na shochati na kangshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvatah tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. Only self-realization by attainment of the above high qualifications of Vedic wisdom, austerity, etc., can help one on the path of devotional service. But failing in devotional service, one remains still imperfect, because even in that position of self-realization, one cannot factually know the Supreme Lord. By self-realization, one is qualified to become a devotee, and the devotee, by service mood, bhaktya only, can gradually know the personality of Godhead. One should not, however, misunderstand the import of Vishate, enters into, as referring to merging into the existence of the Supreme. Even in material existence, one is merged in the existence of the Lord. No materialist can disentangle self from matter, for the self is merged in the external energy of the Lord. As no layman can separate butter from milk, no one can extricate the merged self from matter by acquiring some material qualification. This Vishate by devotion, bhaktya, means to be able to participate in the association of the Lord in person. Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord, means to become free from material entanglement and then to enter into the kingdom of God, becoming one like Him. Losing one's individuality is not the aim of Bhakti Yoga or of the devotees of the Lord. There are 5 types of liberation, one of which is called Sayuja Mukti, or being merged in the existence of the body of the Lord. In other forms of liberation, maintain the individuality of the particle soul and involve being always engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. The word Vishate used in the verses of the Bhagavad Gita is thus meant for the devotees, who are not at all anxious for any kind of liberation. The devotees are satisfied simply in being engaged in the service of the Lord, regardless of the situation. Lord Brahma is the first living being, who directly learned the Vedic wisdom from the Lord, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. Therefore, who can be a more learned Vedantist than Lord Brahma? He admits that in spite of his perfect knowledge in the Vedas, he was unable to know the glories of the Lord. Since no one can be more than Lord Brahma, how can a so-called Vedantist be perfectly cognizant of the absolute truth? The so-called Vedantists, therefore, cannot enter into the existence of the Lord without being trained in the matter of Bhakti Vedanta, or Vedanta plus Bhakti. Vedanta means self-realization, and Bhakti means realization of the personality of Godhead, to some extent. No one can know the personality of Godhead in full, but at least to a certain extent, one can know the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, by self-surrender and a devotional attitude, and by nothing else. In the Brahma Samhita also, it is said, Vedeshu Durlabham, or simply by study of Vedanta, one can hardly find out the existence of the personality of Godhead. But the Lord is a Durlabham Atma Bhakto, very easily available to his devotee. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, was not satisfied simply with compiling the Narad. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, was not satisfied simply with compiling the Vedanta Sutras, but over and above this, by the advice of his spiritual master Narada, he compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam in order to understand the real import of Vedanta. Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, is the absolute medium by which to understand the absolute truth. Maharaj, would you like to speak on this? Om Gyana Tamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tam Aham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam.
I can say a few words. It makes sense that because with unadulterated love and devotion purchases him. And when someone's purchased, that means they can do whatever they like with you. I mean, in a sense, if he has the power of attorney over another person, he can dispose of all this property, or he can do whatever he likes. Krishna agrees to make some of his opulences known to others other than pure devotees. Just like a wealthy man, if he's doing business with some company, he has to show his bona fides, has to show his credentials. And he does it for business purposes. But for handing over all of his property and spending his time with someone, giving someone his full attention, then they have to be very intimate with him. They have to have proven themselves trustworthy beyond any doubt. And then he'll give himself. It's like some families. There's some families that are very closely knit. And unless you're a member of that family, you can't really enter close to the father, beginning. Because the others are very careful not to let anyone in who may disturb the father, who may misuse his good generosity, his good intentions. He may be very free, very liberal with giving himself. But those who are very closely, they'll keep an eye, very close eye. So that's the way it is. Even Vaikuntha, you see there's gatekeepers in Vaikuntha. Because that's the Lord's abode, personal abode. And it's not for everybody. It's not that everybody should go there. If they become qualified, then they're invited to come. We can't invite ourselves to a big party. Say some very big person organizes a party. We can't just invite ourselves. They say, where's your invitation? I've done so much work with such and such. Fine, sir, we appreciate that. But this is an invitation-only affair. And that's what the Lord's affair is. It's personal. You want to deal with his energies. He's got so many energies. And they're also very interesting. Most people are not even interested in God, the person. Nowadays, if you say, you'd like to know who God, the person is, not particularly. There's no interest. They like to hear about his opulences and certain extraordinary things, but the internal person, they're not interested because their hearts are impure, still desiring material things. So Krishna, he reveals himself to those who want him and they don't care about his opulences. Or they say, a wealthy man, she only loves me for my money. It's well known that sometimes if one has a lot of money, then he may be sought after by many women. But many of them are just interested in his money. If they can get his money without him, they'd prefer that. And he knows that. He can tell. Sometimes they're good actors. They fool him. But he's always sad. So Krishna is so open-hearted, so willing to give himself that he has to be careful. Therefore, it's said, Krishna easily gives liberation, but he doesn't give bhakti so easily. Once he gives bhakti, he's purchased. So it makes sense. It's not that, and the beauty is that everyone ultimately is part of that family, that internal, that very intimate relationship with Krishna. But because they've stayed away for so long and they misbehaved so much, they have to do something again to get purified. They have to show that they've learned their lesson. So, therefore, they have to take up devotional service in earnest. There's nothing else they have to do. It's not like they have to go and perform all kinds of austerities. Because Krishna is, Brahma says here, austerities are not sufficient. Learning is not sufficient. Yoga power, yoga mystic powers are not sufficient. So many things are not sufficient. What is sufficient? Pure devotional service. Anya bilashta shunyam. Have no interest in any material benefits from the relationship. That's pretty hard to imagine how you could be interested in the Lord, but not interested in any of his opulences. The gopis don't care for his opulences. That's the unique position of the Brajbasis, is that they don't care for his opulence at all. And even the queens of Dwarka sometimes admit that we are attracted to the Lord, of course. We like being the wives of kings, of a king, most wealthy king. Whereas the gopis, they're not even given any respect as wives. They're disrespected by their own family members because of their relationship with Krishna, and so forth. They don't get children from Krishna. So they miss out on so many of the things that people generally like to associate with a very glorious person for. Get offspring by him, recognition, enter in opulence. No, the Brajbasis don't care about any of that. They lose all their reputation. They'll give up anything just to be with Krishna, or just not even to be with him, but to serve him in any way. Well, that's what Krishna's looking for. That's the real thing that Krishna wants. What do you give the person who has everything? You give your heart, give your soul, then he's purchased.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj. Does anybody have any questions on that?
So, how can we give our heart and soul to Krishna?
Well, by engaging in devotional service, like we're hearing here, it's not that any of these other processes qualified Brahma to know about the Supreme Lord. None of these qualifications were sufficient, but he could only understand him to the little bit to serve the Lord, is serving him with eagerness, the eagerness of his heart. Hridot kantyavata. So that devotional service mood is what qualified him to. That's how we give our heart to Krishna, our devotional service mood. So a little bit more on this point with the qualifications and that Lord Brahma was speaking about. We see a related point in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says in chapter 7, text 30, that those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So one can, that actually wasn't the verse that I wanted to read, but it's related. But I was actually thinking of this one, chapter 8, text 28. Vedeshu, Yageshu, Tapashu, what's the meter? Vedeshu, Yageshu, Tapashu, Chaiva, Daneshu, Yat Punya Palam Pradishtam, Atyeti Tat Sarvamidam Viditva, Yogi Param Stanam Upaiti Chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So Krishna is explaining there in the Bhagavad Gita that whatever you get from the study of the Vedas, which is knowledge, you'll get that in devotional service. And whatever someone would get from yagyas, which is the heavenly enjoyment and those kind of things, they'll get that same pleasure or bliss in devotional life. And whatever they'll get from tapasya, namely the mystic powers, even by devotion, great devotees, saints have all mystic powers. And then by charity, someone gets pious credits. But by performing devotional service, one is getting all pious credit, but still they're not concerned with it. They're doing the highest welfare work. So whatever someone would get from all of these processes that were described here, study of the Vedas, the different mystic powers, all these different types of things, whatever someone will get, they'll get much, much more from devotional service. And then what Krishna said there, Yogi Param Stanam Upaiti Chadyam. They'll also go back to Krishna. So that's the whole mission of human life, is made successful by engaging in devotional service with this eagerness and this service mood. Yes, Maharaj?
I think this discussion has helped me understand something that I was having a hard time understanding. Now I'll mention it. Sometimes devotees in our movement, leaders in our movement, perform great sacrifices. Sacrifice, in other words, they may go to a pilgrimage with thousands of devotees. And then they give all the pious credit that's included in the persons who go. They've agreed to this. It's like part of they give all their pious credits to a particular person, let's say a devotee who's ill or something or something. I was wondering, why do they do that? Why? That's a lot to give away. I mean, they go for a month sometimes, and they do all these austerities, take baths in all the holy places, chant the Lord's holy name, and they're giving away all the benefits. And they're not doing it as a joke. I mean, they mean it, really. They solemnly declare, please take all the benefits. Why? Why do they do it? Well, the answer is here.
Because they actually attain everything just by engaging in the Lord's service?
Because they're doing service to the Vaishnavas. They get much more than that. They don't worry about that. It's all taken care of. They can give away all their pious credits for everything, but as long as they're doing it in devotional service, and there's no nothing to compare to it.
So everything is achieved by devotional service to the Lord, and it's incomparable. So we've have the best opportunity to actually engage in the Lord's service. Were there any other questions that might have come up? One of the other points that was mentioned in this part was at the end, we were hearing the glories of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, is the absolute medium by which to, well, actually, now I'm sorry, I was kind of forgetting, but now I'm remembering. Another thing that was mentioned in the middle was how by understanding the Lord or knowing him to some extent, one can become like the Lord, not merge with the Lord and become the same as him, but they can attain a form like the Lord. And that's also described in the Bhagavad Gita, that yam yam vapi smaran bhavam chajjante kalevaram tam tam avaiti kunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha, in chapter 8, text 6, where Krishna explains that whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So by engaging in service to the Lord, like we're hearing, then one will, if one is fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, then they'll go back to the Lord at the end of life, because what will happen? They'll be absorbed in the Lord, and so that's what their focus will be on, and so that state they'll attain. They'll become like him, and that he is eternal, he's full of bliss, and he's full of knowledge. So the devotee will also attain that same spiritual state. They'll be eternal, full of bliss, and full of knowledge, just to a very minute degree of that. The Lord is infinite, and the soul, the jiva soul, is infinitesimal. And that's also a really important part of the Bhagavad Gita to understand, because whatever we are focused on in life, then we'll attain that state at the end of our life. So that's why it's so important to become fully engaged in Krishna's service. Somebody might say, well, just at the end of life, I'll just chant a few Hare Krishnas and then I'll be good to go. But we can see practically, what does the mind do even at the end of the day? Someone might say, okay, I'll go out and party the whole day, but then I'll just, at the end, I'll just dream of, at the end of the day, I'll just dream of Krishna. I'll do some kind of nonsense activity for the day, such as party. And then at the end, I'll chant Hare Krishna before I go to sleep, and I'll dream of Krishna. But what happens? Or whatever they want to dream about. They can even say, I'll dream about any specific thing. But what actually happens is that you don't actually get to choose where your mind is going to be when you're in that state. When you go to sleep, your mind will go where it's going to go. So if you were doing parties or whatever the whole day, then when you're sleeping, the mind, it's not going to go to whatever you just chose at the end of the day, but it'll think of parties or whatever was happening during the daytime. So the way that, similarly at the time of death, the mind will be wherever we've been focusing it our whole life. And not only our thoughts, but then also the way that we're feeling, or where our emotions are focused towards. Like we see in the verse, bhava. We know that word already. We hear that often in like Nectar of Devotion, which is like the feeling that somebody has. So we might be thinking I'm not the body, but then where is our feeling or emotions? My emotions are still connected to the body. Something wrong happens with my body and I become very upset or something like this. So we can see, where is our feeling, our thinking, where is our focus going? That's where we'll go at the time of death. So if one makes the serious effort to be fully absorbed in Krishna's service, then their whole life, then at the time of death, Even if something happens with the body, like they're not able to chant, the throat is choked up or something and not able to chant, still internally they'll be chanting from the platform of the soul. They'll be focused on Krishna. So that one is helpful to keep in mind. And then that verse that I accidentally read at the beginning, Krishna explains this a little more, that those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So the person who knows him at the time of death is the pure devotee. As we're hearing here, it's not by any of these other processes that someone is going to know the Supreme Lord, but it's only by their devotional service attitude, the eagerness of their heart to serve the Lord. That's the person who will actually know him at the end of this life and then go back to him. So those are just a few points. Is there any questions or comments? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.